Welcome to my YouTube channel, Zona de Guerra YT. ZONA 1947, America at the Crossroads of Empire and Cold War. A historical story focused on 1415. August 1947 and the U.S. global position. Introduction. A world in flames. A nation in power. In the summer of 1947, while India and Pakistan were gaining independence, the United States was stepping into a new battlefield. A war without bullets, but with consequences as grave as any world war. By August 14, 1947, the U.S. had emerged as a superpower. The Cold War had unofficially begun. The world was divided into zones of influence, Soviet versus American. This is the story of how ZONA began, a new kind of war zone in diplomacy, espionage, ideology, and global control. Chapter 1. Seeds of the Cold War. While Asia celebrated independence, the U.S. government was focusing on Soviet expansion into Eastern Europe, the threat of communism spreading across the globe, the race for nuclear dominance after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 1945. ZONA begins here. The battleground was no longer fields, it was politics, intelligence, and ideology. Chapter 2. Truman Doctrine, 1947. In March 1947, months before 14th August, President Harry Truman declared, "It must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples resisting subjugation." This was a direct message to the Soviet Union. By August, the U.S. began supplying weapons to Greece and Turkey. It created the first zona of Cold War influence in the Mediterranean. The CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, was established in 1947 to manage covert actions. Chapter 3. Marshall Plan versus Soviet Bloc. In June 1947, U.S. Secretary of State George Marshall introduced the Marshall Plan, a $13 billion aid package to rebuild Europe. By August 1947, U.S. influence in Western Europe solidified. The USSR refused aid and pressured Eastern countries to reject it. The zona deepened. Europe split into East and West. Chapter 4. Espionage war begins. As Pakistan and India were forming governments, the U.S. and USSR were already waging spy wars. Nuclear secrets were being stolen. Double agents operated from Berlin to Washington. The FBI began hunting for Soviet spies in America, e.g., Alger-Hiss case begins around 1947. This was the silent battlefield, zona of mines, files, and betrayal. Chapter 5. U.S. and South Asia. A new zone of interest. Though the U.S. had no major involvement in the partition of India and Pakistan, it quickly recognized Pakistan and India diplomatically, saw South Asia as a potential Cold War zone, began watching Kashmir conflict closely. India-Pakistan war began in October 1947. South Asia became a future zona, one the U.S. would engage in during the 1965 Indo-Pak War, the 1971 Bangladesh liberation, post-9/11 War on Terror in Afghanistan. But the first footprints were in 1947. Chapter 6. Nuclear Shadows. In August 1947, the U.S. was the only nuclear power, but the USSR was close. They detonated their first bomb. In 1949, the U.S. began preparing nuclear zona strategies, e.g., air bases, submarine deployment plans. Chapter 7. Domestic Zona, America at Home. At home in 1947, veterans returned from WW2 to racial segregation, poverty, and housing crises. The seeds of the civil rights movement began to grow. Anti-communist hysteria started to rise, leading to McCarthyism in the 1950s. This was the internal zona, where freedom and fear clashed. Chapter 8. The Zona Map Redrawn. By the end of August 1947, America had unofficially redrawn the world. Europe divided between NATO and Soviet bloc. Asia, watching China's civil war and Japan's reconstruction. Middle East, oil interests growing. South Asia, watching a new zona being born, with nuclear potential. Conclusion. August 1947. The Invisible War begins. While the world celebrated independence in Delhi and Karachi, in Washington, D.C., generals and diplomats were preparing for a global war of influence, a zone of control that would last decades. From 1947 onward, The United States would not just fight on battlefields, it would fight in parliaments, in spy networks, in technology labs, and in the hearts of foreign nations. Thanks for watching videos. Like, a comment, and subscribe my YouTube channel.